All right, guys, put this on the screen because something snapped in the UK this week. And it wasn't a border fence or a dinghy or a policy memo. It was Britain's entire explanation for why people are showing up at its shores. Now, Prime Minister Keir Starmer stepped in front of cameras and declared the asylum system is unsustainable. He promised order, he blamed rising numbers, and maybe the numbers are rising, but that's not the whole story. Here's the part he didn't say, and here's the part nobody in Westminster ever says. Britain isn't drowning in strangers, it's drowning as a result of consequences. Consequences from what, you might ask? Well, decades of foreign policy decisions, interventions, war, sanctions, bad alliances, resource deals, all made with the confidence of a country convinced the world would never send a reply. Well, the reply just landed in Dover. Because let's be clear, Starmer is trying to confront the wave without confronting the actual tide. And the tide didn't start at the UK border. It started at the places the UK helped shape in the very first place. So try to take a breath and think about this, right? Because the regions producing the most asylum seekers today are the same regions where Britain had major strategic, economic, or military involvement over the last 50 years. Now, that's not ideology, that's geography with receipts. I mean, we're talking about Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan. Every time Britain touched these regions, it left fingerprints. And fingerprints, they don't just prove guilt, they prove influence. And influence in these circumstances shapes outcomes. And outcomes shape migration. But if you listen to Parliament, you'd think these arrivals were some kind of cosmic mistake. Like thousands of people collectively said, hey, you know what? Let's go to Kent. With no backstory, no geopolitical context, no structural cause. And that story is very convenient, but it's also very false. Because if you think about all these channel crossings, they're steady, they're predictable, they're tied to specific regions. And this is an uncomfortable truth. Refugees are coming from places where the ground collapsed underneath them. War, conflict, famine, state failure, economic collapse, and the UK wasn't a bystander in those collapses. It was an actor in many of them. So if we pause for a moment, this doesn't mean that Britain caused every crisis all by itself alone. But it does mean the debate is dishonest when politicians act like none of this had history attached to it. And that's why Starmer's crackdown feels like tightening a faucet when the real leak is the cracked pipe underneath the house. He inherited a system built on denial, a political class that treats immigration like a sudden storm instead of a forecast anyone could have seen on the map. So this is the core of the problem here. The UK talks about borders as if borders exist in its own vacuum, but they don't. Borders are the last mile of foreign policy. So let's think of it like this, right? And this is probably something Westminster, doesn't want anyone to hear. But if you toss a stone into a lake, you don't get to act shocked when the ripples come back and hit your feet. And that's what's happening. Those ripples are families in boats. Those ripples are asylum claims. And those ripples are the return path of instability Britain helped shape abroad in the very first place. Now, let's get into the political reality of this, because Starmer is not the villain here. He's the one stuck holding a system built on half a century of bipartisan denial. And now he's trying to control a global tide with administrative tweaks. Longer wait times, tougher rules, new agreements. But It's a policy band-aid on a geopolitical fracture. He can show the wave, or he can try to slow the wave. He can redirect it, but he can't stop it because pressure always finds the gap. And Britain's gap isn't at Dover. Britain's gap is in its foreign policy memory. So let's take a moment and let's look at the economics, because immigration debates always pretend the financial dimension doesn't exist. And instability abroad, it creates a lot of problems. I mean, we're talking supply chain shocks, defense spending spikes, risk price volatility, regional insecurity, economic displacement. People don't move because they want a different grocery store. They move because the bottom fell out of the world beneath them. And that collapse didn't happen in a vacuum. Britain was in the room. They were in the room diplomatically, militarily, economically. You cannot separate immigration from foreign policy any more than you can separate a shadow from the thing that's casting it in the first place. And the asylum system is cracking because the global system it depends on is cracking. Now, here's the political landmine Starmer will never step on. Britain is being reshaped by the same instability it wants to help shape. Not by armies, not by adversaries, but by families with backpacks and plastic bags carrying the last pieces of homes destroyed by war and intervention. It's the echo of a century of global power, and it's now arriving in small boats. But it's not arriving as revenge, not as an invasion, but it is a byproduct. It is a consequence. So if we zoom out further, what Britain is facing is the same thing that the United States faces at its southern border, the same thing Europe faces in the Mediterranean, and the same thing Australia faces in the Pacific. The migration is not random. Migration is the map of global failure. When institutions collapse abroad, borders, they get stressed at home. When Western powers intervene without long-term planning, instability becomes transnational. And when economies fall, people move. This is geopolitical gravity. It doesn't care about slogans. And Starmer's new policy package, it may change the process, but it cannot change the pressure. All right, guys, do I have this all right? Do I have it all wrong? Put it in the comment section below. I look forward to reading and replying to all your comments. And once again, guys, thank you so much for watching here on The Baseline. Okay, cheers, everybody.